The first movement of the C.P. Bach solo flute sonata in A minor.
Thank you so much, David. That was gorgeous. A fitting beginning to our service. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Sunday service here at Unity Center, DC on a beautiful day in June. My name is John Bell, and I'll be your platform assistant today. As you can see, we have a special musician who's our friend David Lonkevich on the flute. And today our wise friend, the Reverend Linda Martella-Whitsett, will deliver the message. The title of Reverend Martella-Whitsett's talk today is The Audacity to Stand. I would like to ask you to join me in a brief centering prayer. This is called the Prayer for All Nations. As I recite the prayer, it might be helpful for you to envision the entire earth cupped in your hands. O Almighty Sun, whose light cleareth away all clouds, we take refuge in thee. King of all humanity, God of all deities, Lord of all angels, we pray thee. Dispel the mist of illusion from the hearts of the nations. Lift their lives by thy all-sufficient power, and pour upon them thy ever-shining light, thy everlasting life, thy heavenly joy, and thy perfect peace. Amen.
Playing Syrinx for solo flute by Claude Debussy, a piece that he wrote in 1913.
Thank you, David. The flow and the lilt of Debussy was just a beautiful entree into today's message. Thank you so much. And welcome, everyone. It's so wonderful to celebrate Sunday with you again. I'm grateful for the invitation and really grateful we can be so aligned that as your communities start studying Divine Audacity, I can speak about one of our wonderful 12 powers today. Every power I address it's my favorite power. It is. I say it because it is at that time. It's the only thing I can see that power at work. So I'm happy to share with you a message today about our stand ability. And stand ability is one of the ways I like to think about the power of spiritual strength. Have you noticed how difficult it can be for us humans to stand steady in a truth principle, in the face of an opposite appearance, right? Or to stand steady in abundance when I'm experiencing a significant financial challenge, or to stand steady with wholeness in mind while I'm observing distressing medical symptoms. Now, why are we humans more likely to shrink back and wimp out rather than to stand up for something that we believe in, or to stand up and insist on justice for ourselves or for others? How easy can it be for us to give up on our intentions when we face an obstacle, to disappoint ourselves? There's a line in Sia's song, her song Courage to Change, which says hauntingly, I abandon myself daily. In my opinion, I think it means that I could use a dose of spiritual strength. Any of that kind of, quivered inside of you as something to pay attention to, we could use a dose of spiritual strength. So, strength is one of our innate capacities. It's an essential remedy for a mindset of insufficiency, which is a perfectly human tendency to view ourselves perhaps as weak or unable. So Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, defined strength as freedom from weakness, stability of character, the power to withstand temptation, and the capacity to accomplish. So this is why I think of strength as stand ability. So if you have read or been introduced to the book Divine Audacity, you know that I address for each power 3 aspects of that power. There are different ways that power can be expressed in our life experience. And so the 3 that I address for spiritual strength are stability, or the ability to stand steady, right? To stand stable. So stand steady. Courage, or the ability to stand up. And tenacity, our ability to stand ready. We're always ready and going forward. So I'd like to look at these capacities one by one. First is stand steady. So I have a story. I call it Once Upon a Pony. So when I was a preteen, don't remember exactly the age, maybe 10, I was introduced to a pony for the first time. I was a city girl, raised in the city, never had been on a farm, let alone, up close to a farm animal. Well, this was, some stable somewhere where they had ponies that kids could ride, right? So my parents thought no big deal. Well, I know very little about riding a horse, right? Except this, the rider has to direct the horse. Well, this was a little challenging because I got maybe 5 minutes from the tour guide or whoever was helping me, told me, to hold the reins, how to sit, all this kind of stuff. So I get on this pony that might as well have been a horse, to my little body, and it looked awfully big to me. But of course, I was very uncomfortable because all I knew was that I was supposed to shake the reins or, use my feet to press into the side, and the pony would go. Well, the pony went all right, but the pony went toward its stable because there was a big pile of hay right outside of the stable, and it saw it and it wanted it. And I had no ability to direct this pony having very little instruction. So the pony was riding me, it was riding me. And I found that it started to pick up pace and I couldn't do anything about it. And so I was hanging off the side of the pony like this and terrified. I almost fell off a couple of times. And fortunately, the stable guide came back and got me off. So it was very interesting to me. At the time, it was frightening because, I thought I could be crushed here. But I realized that it's important. It's important in spiritual strength is that important capacity to be steady, to be able to stand steady and stable, right? Which means anchored to a firm foundation. It means able to hold a position, to hold thought steady, and to be unwavering and centered. So this is the capacity for us to harness our thoughts. Is that enough to hold the reins? All of these analogies to the pony, right? So a man who, in my estimation, tells a remarkable story about standing steady through terrible circumstances. He spoke at the Community of Unity of San Antonio when I was the minister there years ago. You might know of him. His name is Terry McBride. So Terry is the author of a book called The Hell I Can't. It was published in 2013. Here's what Terry said. He said, it didn't matter that I had an incurable disease. He had a terrible disease. He had necrotizing flesh. So his insides he needed surgery after surgery to remove tissue in his body that was necrotized or dying. He was really, he would have died from this. The doctors thought that was going to be inevitable. So it didn't matter, he said, that I had an incurable disease. It didn't matter that the odds against my getting well were 1,000,000 to 1. It didn't matter that some of the finest doctors in the world said I couldn't expect to come out of this ordeal whole. Listen to that, right? He said, I was done listening. So he stood steady in the truth, in the knowledge of the truth, that wholeness is his essential nature, right? Through years of contrary appearance and painful, terrible ordeal. So he went on to, not only to demonstrate wholeness, but to be a very inspiring speaker, reminding us there's no such thing as a hopeless case and that we can stand steady in the midst of something that feels totally contrary. So spiritual strength says, I stand steady in knowledge of wholeness during times of medical distress. I stand steady in the truth of unifying love when someone I care about has disappointed me. I stand steady in my vision, in my power of imagination when I didn't get the job that I had hoped for. I stand steady in wisdom when I'm worried about my child's self-destructive habits. I stand steady in spiritual strength and embody all the powers that I can as I stand true. So think of the posture, the physical posture that begins a Tai Chi practice. It's also prevalent in all other physical disciplines, even core strength building. It's called, in yoga, it's called Skandasana. It's a semi-squat. So imagine yourself standing in a semi-squat, standing ready, steady, and stable in physicality. I like to do this exercise physically as a representation of spiritual strength. And sometimes by putting myself in a physical posture, I'm helping myself to remember that spiritual strength is natural to me, you see. So here's an affirmation for this stand ability, the ability to stand steady. By the power of spiritual strength, I stand steady and stable. Will you repeat that with me? By the power of spiritual strength, I stand steady and stable. A second aspect of strength is courage, the ability to stand up. The number one characteristic that defines a hero in our culture is courage. You could say that courage is the superpower of superheroes, right? Heroes are empathic, deeply caring about the well-being of others. They face dangers that others would shrink from. They put themselves in harm's way in order to spare others. They stand up to bullies. They slay dragons. Maybe you purchase advance tickets for opening night of the next Marvel movie. Or maybe you relate to Disney characters like Mulan, or Harry Potter, or the Black Panther. Or perhaps you get inspired by everyday heroes, such as the police officer who risked her reputation and the ridicule of her own team to shelter a suspected perpetrator who was displaying obvious symptoms of mental illness. Or the off-duty medic who jumped into the flames of a burning vehicle to pull out the driver. Well, we're especially moved by displays of courage that right wrongs. We all want to stand up for our values in ways that are personal as well as communal. Now, courage, it's in our inherent capacity. Spiritual courage underlies our ability to act courageously in time and in space, to realize or to make real our capacity to stand up. The proverbial dragon you slay could be quite personal, couldn't it? Like overcoming a consciousness of sickness, poverty, or worthlessness. Maybe distrust in relationships. Or you could focus innate courage on issues of justice, dignity, and opportunity that show up in community. My daughter, Alicia, displayed this capacity of standing up or courage when she was a teacher's assistant in Chicago several years back. It's several years ago because you might remember this television series that was called What Would You Do? You know, it was sort of like that hidden camera, right, kind of show, but it was focused on displaying, creating a scene on the street where a group of people would then pass by. And the question is, would they do something if they saw it, you know? So Alicia, my daughter, had watched an episode of What Would You Do? She called me in tears afterwards. She said, Mom, there was this scene on a street where a group of guys were all together and they turned on one of them and started beating up on him. And they watched the video, showed bystanders one by one walking past. And then they asked the viewers, what would you do? Alicia was so disturbed by this question that that's why she was calling me in tears. She's like, Mom, I don't know what I would do. I know what I would want to do, but I'm afraid I might not. You know, I might not have it in me to get in the middle of a brawl, for example. Well, I kid you not when I tell you that 24 hours later, it was the next evening, Alicia called me again. That morning, she had been waiting at her bus stop in Chicago on her route to the school where she was the teacher's assistant. For teenagers with autism, this was a tough group of kids, right? Well, standing with her at the bus stop was a group of middle school boys. They were right in front of their school. And the biggest, tallest, meanest looking kid in the group literally turned toward one of the other boys and started pummeling him. This was her exact experience. And the other kids, of course, were joining in and punching this kid. Well, Alicia was breathless telling me this, and she said to me, Mom, I didn't even stop to think about it. I saw that helpless kid being hit, and I went right up to the instigator. I looked up at him, and I shouted, stop it right now. He was so tall, I was like straining my neck to see him, but I locked eyes with this kid. And I had the guts to confront him. He was so surprised to be stopped. And he stared back, he glared back at me for a minute, you know, and then he lowered his gaze and he backed away. She said, my bus came just then, and I grabbed the chance to get on that bus and got to the school, and I broke down in front of my colleagues. I was just, a bucket of just, upset, and I was crying and shaking because I had done it. I answered the question, she said. Well, it probably won't surprise you to know that my daughter Alicia is an empath. She feels and she cares. She rose up in spiritual strength and stood up for a kid that she had never met and would likely never come across again in this lifetime. Well, sometimes, our values bump up against each other. Like when this happens, it can complicate our intention to stand up. I mean, think about Alicia's having to make a decision at that point. It was either, look, I'm going to prioritize my own safety right here, or I care so deeply about the well-being of others, and especially, somebody who's in a position of being victimized. I care, and I'm going to do something about it. Well, she made a decision. Which value is going to rise to the surface and be prioritized in this moment? That's always the question for us, right? There's lots of examples of values conflict that occurred during and after the aftermath of the pandemic, for example. You had to decide, didn't you, whether to attend an event with relatives that you knew had not been vaccinated and would not be wearing masks. You had to determine which of those two values would rise in prioritization: the value of extended family connection and the value of safeguarding yourself and your immediate family. And you have to decide which is more important in a moment and stand up for that value. If you would opt to safeguard your immediate family, you'd be missing out on seeing relatives you love, especially that one aunt who may not have a chance to see again. She's old and she may be dying, But if you would opt to attend the gathering, you'd be risking the possibility of becoming ill or infecting those you share your home with. There's no right or wrong answer. Can you see that? There is the matter of what you stand for. What issues in the world do you care about most? And what are you doing to stand up for these causes? I have given this a lot of thought. I even marched in a protest in my county a few years ago. I thought that was mine to do. And it was fun, sort of, kind of, but I didn't see that it made any difference. The more I thought about it, the more I gathered that the difference can be made in the voting booth. Therefore, I signed up with an organization that holds letter writing campaigns to encourage lapsed voters in my party to get to the polls. I write letters to people that I'll probably never meet in person in my state and in other states, and I let them know why I vote, and I ask them to make their voices heard by voting. I'm not the person to march in protest. I'm not the person to go door to door. I am a person who can write letters, and maybe a person who can drive people needing a ride to the polls on voting day. You see, what can I do to stand up for what's important to me? By the power of spiritual strength, I stand up. Will you say that? Repeat that. By the power of spiritual strength, I stand up. A third way that spiritual strength can be displayed is by keeping on, keeping on. It's also called tenacity, right? This is the capacity to stand ready. Now, in 1953, a man named Norm Larsen set out to create a water displacement formula to be used as a rust prevention solvent and a degreaser in the aerospace industry. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, what's that all mean? Well, the product worked so well that employees were sneaking some home to use in their homes. Well, Larsen took note of the product's effectiveness and began to search for ways to expand the business. His solution was to put it into aerosol cans for at-home use. Well, 5 years later, the product was on store shelves, and it continues to this day to be sold in every hardware store. Remember, this was 1953 was the start of this. The product, you know it well. It's called WD-40. Where did WD-40 get its name? Water displacement, perfected on the 40th try. Did you know Walt Disney was turned down 302 times by bankers and financiers who thought his idea of Mickey Mouse would go nowhere? And at the age of 65, Colonel Sanders started, at the age of 65, he started traveling by car to different restaurants and cooked his fried chicken on the spot for restaurant owners. If the owner liked the chicken, they'd enter into a handshake agreement to sell his chicken. He was turned down 1,009 times before his chicken was first accepted. If at first you don't succeed, you know the adage, right? Wow. So spiritual strength, standing steady, standing courageous, and standing tenacious, right? This is the stand ready part of spiritual strength. I am ready. I'm positioning myself for success, and I stay with it. I will not be dissuaded. So this aspect of spiritual strength, I stand ready. I stand ready. So here's the entire affirmation, comprising all three of the aspects of spiritual strength. I am spiritual strength, standing steady, courageous, and tenacious. Will you repeat that with me? I am spiritual strength, standing steady, courageous, and tenacious. And so it is, friends, and so it is. I'm so grateful. Let's devote ourselves to a few moments of meditation, and I'd love for us to focus on the power of spiritual strength. So adjust your posture in such a way that you can be in touch with the physical center of spiritual strength, your lower back. So one way to do that would be to sit forward in your chair with your feet spread shoulder width apart and your feet flat on the floor. As you sit forward, you'll notice, in other words, you're not leaning back into the back of your chair. Your pelvis slightly dips forward, which naturally lengthens your spine. Keeping the spine lengthened, bend forward just for a moment from the waist and place your elbows on your knees. You can do this through the whole meditation if you choose, or just for a moment to get in touch with spiritual strength. And if you rest your elbows on your knee and clasp your hands together, just rest your chin there. So what you're doing is just opening your lower back. And just be in touch. Place your attention there on the lower back. Spiritual strength. The color for that in the unity understanding is a spring green, a perfect time of year we are at. Spring green, the beauty of the growth of the springtime. So just steady yourself in that posture for a moment. And keep your attention on the seat of spiritual strength, the small of your back. Now, if this is just not comfortable for meditation, certainly come back to a posture where you can remain alert and yet comfortable, okay? So centering that attention on the small of the back, I spread the spring green light of spiritual strength throughout my body. I see it as like a beam of green light that's originating in the lower back and spreading. I open myself to the light of spiritual strength, to the truth of my magnificent capacity to stand steady, to stand up, to stand ready. And so I recognize that the principle of stability is my source. When I say God is my source, I can say God is the principle of stability, or the principle of strength. And so I recognize spiritual strength is a part of all that is. It's what I call God. It's one of the descriptors for that divine nature: stability, courage, tenacity, strength. And so I take a moment to recognize that the very atmosphere is filled with strength. That strength is one of the ways that we can think of infinity, infinitely accessible, infinitely powerful spiritual strength. And in this way, I can know that spiritual strength is inherent. I can draw from it at any time. And so let me claim it. Let me integrate my knowledge of myself as a human being who can possess strength, and that counterpart of my humanity, which is my divinity, which is strength. It is me. It's my nature by right of my full humanity and full divinity. I claim and I am spiritual stability, spiritual courage, spiritual tenacity. I am strength. Be still for a moment as you integrate. I am strength. And make that claim. Claiming I am spiritual strength, I turn my mind to thinking, how can I make this real? How can I live in realization of this as knowledge that is useful to me? How can I go forward utilizing spiritual strength? I can think about things like that I'm able to stand steady as the winds of change swirl around me. I don't have to be thrown or tossed about by shifting conditions. I stand steady, spiritually strong. Or maybe it's this: I'm able to stand up for my values. I'm able to stand up, speak up, and be a force for powerful, constructive, evolutionary progress in life. Or I'm able to stand ready by my power of spiritual tenacity. I never cave in the face of seeming obstacles. I stand steady, forward facing, persisting in the direction of my intentions. Think about for a moment which of these aspects of strength really strike you as a starting place for you to practice spiritual strength today. And what particularly might you do? How might you think? What might you say that demonstrates this capacity? And no doubt, if something specific doesn't occur to you in this moment, that you trust that you've set this in motion, and that you can expect that as the day proceeds, in the next couple of hours, something will become clear to you and you will know the way forward, standing in spiritual strength. And so because of that, we can be, and I invite myself and invite you to just recognize the feelings of appreciation and feel them in your body. The sense of something valuable has just occurred. I have just, received a message. I'm just taking in an understanding, to know that, whenever I perceive that I am weak, I can now declare with confidence the great truth of being, that all the strength I need, all the strength that is mine. and I can call it forth from within me and appreciate my limitless power to stay strong in all circumstances, to be able to say authentically, I stand steady, I stand up, and I stand ready. Take a deep breath of recognition, a breath, and as you breathe it in, know that that breath is traveling to every cell of your body that receives this as its instruction for the day, a dose of truth. And as you breathe out, say to yourself, amen, 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 which means I get it and I will go forward with it. And so it is.
I'll be playing the Danse de la Chèvre by Arthur Honegger, which is translated to the Dance of the Goat, which is an abstract story of a sleeping goat in the meadow who is dreaming of gallivanting around the field, and he's sort of sleeping and dreaming and stirring in his sleep, and then suddenly he starts standing up and he starts running around the field and enjoying nature, and he sees some of the most beautiful things that he's ever seen. And then he tires himself out towards the end of the story, and he just simply goes back into his trance and back into the sleep that he started the story in. But I think it's a good little musical story. So I hope you enjoy it.
got good messages today, everyone. Strength and gratitude. It's always good to be reminded. Would you join me now in a closing prayer? I think this closing prayer seems to fit in with what we've talked about today, so yay for us. This is a prayer that was originally written by Marianne Williamson, but was made very famous by Nelson Mandela, who used it in a talk. It's on light. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be so brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? We were born to make manifest the glory, the God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our fear, our presence automatically liberates others. And so it is. Amen.
As a young adult, especially, who, you know, had lots of reasons to feel like she didn't have some capabilities, you know, but she was a Unity kid that, you know, was taught that she's divine. She was taught that she has spiritual capacities, and she also always cared about the well-being of other people. And so she proved to herself that that's it's a consistent refrain.
Wow.
And she's prepared for it. You know, she's prepared for it by right of prioritizing that in her life. It wasn't always a physical response, right? A lot of times it was an emotional connection with someone who maybe was being bullied or something like that. But that's the first time she was faced with a situation where she had to really face her own fear, but get right above it, say it doesn't matter. This is more important. That's that hierarchy of values. This is more important right in this moment than my own safety, than my own caring about myself is helping out this young kid and stopping this bad behavior. It just, but you're right. It's something we can cultivate that kind of consciousness where this is what's really important to me. And let me demonstrate it in safe ways. Let me demonstrate it in my daily life, so that if I'm ever faced with something that's right in my face and big and maybe troublesome, I know what I stand for. It was a remarkable thing for her. And for me to witness, right?
Yeah.
It came at a time, it provoked in her a question for herself that she lived with. She cared about it enough that she was in tears over it.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
worried
Yeah.
about, like, how would I handle this? And man, and she didn't think. That was the thing.
She didn't think. She just immediately. Wow.
She just acted. And this is what I find, there's the power. Oh, so many of our powers come to mind when I think about this. But, Giles and I, when we lived in San Antonio, we were big Spurs fans. Not that we're not now, but we attended games. We were in a winning team. In the years that we were there, they won 3 championships within 6 years. They were like a hot team. Anyway, I was thinking about, one of the star players, Tim Duncan, making, and these characters making these easy looking 3-pointers, right? Just like, wow, it's like no big deal to them is what it seemed like. But when I read about Tim Duncan, for example, he talked about the years of practice to perfect that kind of throw, so that at the time when the demand was there for it, he didn't have to think about it. Because it's, you think about that. If he had to stop and say, okay, now where do I put my feet and how do I hold my upper body and where do I do, what do I do? How do I fix that aim? If he had to think about any one of those steps, he would have missed that shot and he would have missed the opportunity for that shot. And so this is where I think the preparation, the placing ourselves in readiness, for what we want to be able to demonstrate. This is where we turn our minds to spiritual strength and prepare for it, prepare our day for how am I going to embody strength today in the things that I know that I'm encountering. Let me prepare and be ready for that demonstration. And then when it comes, it just comes and you don't think about it because you have practiced enough that you have the skill, and the consciousness on top of that allows the demonstration. My co-author, Reverend Deanne Morency, she's in Marin County, California. She and I worked on creating a curriculum. We were thinking about prayer chaplain teams because I've been teaching, since my first book, I've been teaching prayer chaplains in the field around unity movement for the last couple decades. And she had been doing her own with that. Anyway, we collaborated and our intention was to create a curriculum. Well, it turned out to be a book that's a textbook. It really is. It's a guide for how to move through what those classically trained in unity prayer think of them as the 5 steps of unity prayer. We've relanguaged them. We've changed some of the vocabulary to make it accessible for the 21st century way of thinking, right? Like, for example, the word, we always have to explain when we talk about unity's affirmations and denials. You always have to explain what denial isn't, right, in order to get it right. So we just changed the word to negation, right, of affirmation and negation. That's just one example, but we changed some of the languaging to help for the understanding of the contemporary mind. And it's a thorough explanation of the underpinnings, the principles behind affirmative prayer, but then also how we flow through those movements and how we understand unity prayer. So we encouraged, of course, this is acknowledging that she and I can't personally travel throughout the whole unity movement and teach this, far and wide. We are doing some teaching on Zoom. We just had a class in April, and next July 9th through the 13th, 2025, we're holding an in-person Discover Your Divinity retreat, a prayer retreat at Unity Village. So you might look at that. If you're itching to get to Unity Village, this might be an opportunity to go and have a really, a lot of silence, a lot of spiritual work together as well as individually over several days.
And when is that going to be?
July 9th to the 13th, 2025. It's already open for registration at unity.org.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I think I'm in with that.
I'd love to see you come. Maybe sometimes it's just the thing that you can plan on. And we're planning on it early. So because if you've been to Unity Village, the hotel fills up quickly. And so if you're inclined to go, get your hotel reservation early so that you can stay on grounds. Wonderful. To bring them alive and have them really, benefit us. Those companion powers are there. And it's sort of like, as I say, I think I wrote that in Divine Audacity. It's like, if I don't practice it, I don't get the benefit of it, right? It's like having a talent for the piano, but never sitting down on the keyboard. If I don't do it, I don't get the benefit of it. I don't get to develop that talent. And so to recognize that these powers are innate, but they're dormant until we activate them in our own experience and bring them to life. And the more I study them, the more I can be particular about how I embody that power, how I can use it, and what a difference it can make. to stand in truth. Because to just say, I'm going to stand in truth today, well, what does that mean? It really means nothing. It's like the be clear and deliberate about what specifically, how specifically I'm going to practice makes it the impression upon me, and it's what sticks with me. Yeah.
We are so blessed here at Unity Center DC for extraordinary speakers, talented musicians who share with us each week their God gift, their message, their inspiration. And for us as recipients, I'd like you to take this moment and be grateful. If you want to express your gratitude by giving a gift to Unity Center DC, it's possible. We'll put up on the screen the options, but you can give online, you can mail a cash or a check to the address you'll see on the screen, so that we can continue this ministry, which has blessed us all. Thank you.